Hello, fifth grade. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of April, and we're going to look at the rest of chapter 16, which was about so far Alaska and Hawaii beyond our boundaries, things that aren't places that we are our territories as Americans, American territories, but not literally attached to the United States. We talked about Alaska and Hawaii. And so now we're going to talk about the Rough Riders, the Spanish-American War, the Panama Canal, etc. We're going to finish chapter 16, and then you'll be studying for a test on chapters 14 and 15 and 16. Okay, so we're at page 199. I think I put that on the board. Yeah, 199, page 202. So it says, you will remember that in the years following Columbus's discovery of America, the Spanish gained control of a large part of the New World. Then other European countries began to build colonies in the New World. As these colonies grew more powerful, they took Spain's colonies away from her. The island of Cuba is located 90 miles south of Florida. It was one of Spain's last possessions in the New World. Though Spain struggled to keep Cuba, the people of Cuba constantly fought for their independence. In an effort to stop the fighting, the Spanish sometimes treated the Cubans cruelly. In time, the people of the United States grew sympathetic toward the Cubans. It was their wish that the people of all countries could be free and independent as Americans were. All right, so Cuba is right. I don't have a map in front of me, but in your book, Cuba is 90 miles below in the Atlantic there, ocean, 90 miles. Let me see if I can find a quick, yeah, so back on page 194, just a quick map for you. Cuba is right here. It's the island right here, and it's right below Florida, about 90 miles. So if you got in a boat and sailed about 90 miles, you would find Cuba, okay? And so the Cuban people, were being mistreated by the Spanish that had kind of taken over Cuba and that were ruling them. And it actually said that they were treated cruelly. And so the people of the United States, as they were hearing the stories of what was going on, how Spain was controlling Cuba and treating their people cruelly, they felt sympathetic. Okay, and so we're kind of watching and waiting and wondering how to help, probably was the mindset at that time. So it says, our government sent the United States battleship Maine on a peaceful mission, to Cuba to protect the Americans living there. All went well until a great explosion sank the Maine. Most of the soldiers were killed or drowned. Who blew up the Maine? Even today, no one knows the answer to that question. At the time, people of the United States blamed the Spanish, even though the Spanish said they did not do it. Remember the Maine became the slogan of many Americans who thought we should go to war with Spain. On April 25th, 1898, our government declared war on Spain. The purpose of the Spanish-American War was to set Cuba free from Spain. Okay, so one of our ships, the Maine, went and was sailing around Cuba to protect the Americans living in Cuba, and it was sunk, and the Spanish were blamed for that. Now, it says today no one really knows the truth, but they probably put enough information together that they believe it's likely, it's not impossible, that the Spanish did that. And so so America declared war, it says, on Spain on April 25th, 1898. Who thought we should go to war on Spain, the Americans, and it was declared on that day. So the purpose of the Spanish-American War was to set Cuba free from Spain. Since the only way to get to Cuba from either the United States or Spain was by water, the navies of both countries became very important. When the war began, Admiral George Dewey of the United States Navy was sent to the Philippine Islands. Although these islands are in the Pacific Ocean near China, they also belong to Spain. Admiral Dewey sailed into a bay of the Philippine Islands where a fleet of Spanish ships was docked. There, the United States Navy destroyed the Spanish ships without receiving harm to our own ships. Okay, so it says, I want to go back up again. So it says, when the war began, that Admiral George Dewey of the United States Navy was sent to the Philippine Islands. And these islands are in the Pacific Ocean near China. They also belong to Spain. So Admiral Dewey sailed into a bay of the Philippine Islands where a fleet of Spanish ships were docked, and it says that he destroyed those ships. So Spain had controlled that dock, that port, where that harbor where the ships were, and Admiral Dewey went in and destroyed Spanish ships, okay? And so Spain obviously isn't going to be pleased with that. And that was, you know, probably part of the retaliation for what they believe they did to the battleship Maine. So meanwhile, Americans were fighting the Spanish in Cuba and in the seas nearby. Theodore Roosevelt, who would one day become president of the United States, led a group of American soldiers known as the Rough Riders. The Rough Riders played an important part in winning the most important land battle fought in the Spanish-American War, the Battle of San Juan Hill. The entire war lasted only 3 months. It was the shortest war the United States had ever fought until that time. Okay, so Theodore Roosevelt, who would one day become a president, he led a group of American soldiers known as the Rough Riders. So obviously, if they were called the Rough Riders, these were pretty tough guys. And they played a part, it says, in winning the most important land battle fought in the Spanish-American War, the Battle of San Juan Hill. And this Spanish-American War only lasted 3 months, Theodore Roosevelt had that major victory in the Battle of San Juan Hill during that time. And at that point, it was the shortest war we've ever been involved in. Okay, so here is the Maine here. The destruction of the battleship Maine angered Americans and led to the Spanish-American War. So we see that. And then when you turn the page, you'll see a picture of the Rough Riders. And Theodore Roosevelt is there. I believe he's right there. It's hard to tell. The picture's kind of dark. And in my book, it's smaller than your picture. And so these are the Rough Riders. And you can see down here in the foreground right here, there's a mountain lion. So their mascot, I guess, was this mountain lion. And these guys are so tough, they have a mountain lion as just sitting there in the picture. Mountain lions are very dangerous to humans. And so, you know, we stay away from mountain lions. But these guys were so tough that their mascot, a mountain lion right there, it says her name was Josephine. Teddy Roosevelt and a group of his Rough Riders are shown here with their mascot, Josephine, a mountain lion. So these guys are fierce. It says results of the Spanish-American War. As a result of the Spanish-American War, Spain gave Cuba her freedom, and the United States received several islands that had previously belonged to Spain, the Philippines and Guam in the Pacific Ocean, and Puerto Rico, an island near Cuba. In return, the United States paid Spain $20 million. During the years after the war, the United States tried to help the people of these islands by building hospitals and schools. Many missionaries from the United States went to the Philippine Islands. Americans helped the people of the Philippines to learn how to govern themselves. Since then, the Philippine Islands have become independent. The people of Puerto Rico and Guam are considered citizens of the United States, but also have their own government. Spain, which once owned a great wealth in American possessions, now own none. Perhaps the most important result of the war to our country is that other countries now saw us as a world power because of our possessions around the globe. Okay, places that we own around the globe. So, So let's look back up here again. As a result of the Spanish-American War, Spain gave Cuba her freedom, and the United States received several islands. Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico became United States territories. Okay, so now as we were getting territories throughout the world here and there, we're becoming more of a world power. All right. Okay, so for your comp check, it says number 1, which American admiral defeated the Spanish fleet in the Philippines? Number 2, what was the name of the group of American soldiers led by Theodore Roosevelt? Number 3, what battle did they fight in? Number 4, who won the Spanish-American War? All right. Now we're going to finish the chapter, so we're going to keep reading, and then you can go back and work on that comp check. It says the Panama Canal. The North American continent is connected to the South American continent by a narrow strip of land called the Isthmus of Panama. This thin strip of land is about 480 miles long and from about 300 to 120 miles wide. On one side of Panama is the Pacific Ocean. On the other side is the Atlantic. So I want to show you a picture. Look back on your map on page 194. And, oh, it's hard to see. Oh, no, here we go. So here is the Panama Canal Zone right here. It's this narrow strip of land right here. The Atlantic Ocean on, if we were facing it, to the right of it, and the Pacific to the left of it, okay? So that's the Panama Canal. That's the strip of land that we're talking about, all right? So you can reference that and go back and look at page 194. And here we see a picture here. They make it a little larger for us. I wanted to show it to you in the context of the United States as a whole, but here they just focus on the Panama Canal, connecting North America and South America, okay? So, papers all over the place here. It says, centuries ago, when Balboa first discovered the Pacific Ocean, he thought how wonderful it would be if only there were a place for ships to sail through this narrow strip of land from one ocean to another. Right now, you can't get through it, okay? So if you want to get to California, you have to sail, and you're over here in Europe, you would have to sail all around South America and come up on the other end. Wouldn't it be great if you could just take a shortcut through here? But it's a solid piece of land right now. That's why we're going to build a canal, which will let ships go through there. We're going to talk more about that, okay? So I'm going to read that again. Centuries ago, when Balboa first discovered the Pacific Ocean, he thought how wonderful it would be if only there were a place for ships to sail through this narrow strip of land from one ocean to the other, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Instead, ships had to travel thousands of extra miles, like I said, around South America to cross from one ocean to the other. As time passed, men talked about building across the narrow strip of land a canal or man-made waterway that would connect the two oceans. However, no work was ever begun because the problems would be too great. Even in the late 1800s, it would have taken millions of dollars to build a canal. Very few countries were willing to risk such a large amount of money, but every country agreed that such a canal would save ships going from ocean to ocean thousands of miles of travel, miles, money, etc. In 1878, I'm on page 201, the French were the first to attempt to build a canal, but they ran into problems and had to stop. The Spanish-American War made the United States realize how important a canal would be to our country's safety. During the war, a United States battleship was ordered to sail from California to Cuba. The ship began the long trip around the South American continent and finally reached Cuba 68 days later. It's more than 2 months later. By then, the war was nearly over. The ship could have arrived in less than half the time if a canal had been built. So in less than a month's time, it could have arrived. So think about that. The United States, during the war, there was a battleship ordered to sail from California to Cuba. Okay, but it can't get there unless it goes all the way around, it says the South American continent, and it takes over 2 months. And by the time it gets there, it's too late. So this canal could help in that regard too, in case we needed warships in different oceans, because it could connect the Atlantic to the Pacific, okay? Fortunately, the United States won the war anyway, even though the ship couldn't get there in time. But what if a battleship were urgently needed to go from one ocean to the other in the future? In 1902, the French sold their rights to build a canal to the United States, okay? So building the canal kept 40,000 people busy. So look at their building. They actually cut a hole in the ground here, and they're going to build and send water through there. The Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean are going to be opened up, and water can flow through there, and ships then could sail to get from one ocean to the next, and make their travel a whole lot faster. All right, so think about what's happening here in this narrow strip of land when we read this next section. When the canal opened, it took 40,000 people to build. When the canal opened in 1914, all nations not at war with the United States were allowed to use the canal because we owned it, so we could control who could use it. Since the United States had bought the right to build this canal, since the United States first had the approval of the people of Panama to build this canal, we didn't just go do it, we got their approval. And since the United States had paid over $300 million to build this canal, the Panama Canal, the United States now had the right to control and protect the canal. Although the United States controlled the canal, the people of Panama have always regarded the 10-mile piece of land on which the canal is built as part of their country. With the passing of years, the people of Panama grew restless. They began to demand that the United States give the country of Panama more control over the canal. Even though the United States broke no law by building the canal in Panama and had every legal right to keep the canal, the United States graciously agreed to give the canal to Panama. In 1978, the United States government voted on a treaty. By this treaty or promise, the United States gave the ownership of the Panama Canal to the country of Panama in the year 2000. According to the treaty, the United States will always have the right to defend the canal in case of war or trouble. However, the fact that this important canal was being placed in the hands of a small, weak country might tempt an enemy to take over Panama, let's turn the page, to take over Panama and thereby gain control of the canal, which could be a huge problem. Many Americans believe that we should have kept the canal to make sure that it remained in safe hands. Over 13,000 ships use the Panama Canal each year. Each ship, whether it is an American or foreign, has to pay a toll to pass through the canal. This toll, figured by the size of the ship, usually amounts to $5,000 or more. If this price sounds high, you must consider not only the cost of building the canal, but also the enormous cost of keeping it repaired and operating. For the country that owns the ship, the toll is much cheaper than the price of sailing a large ship an extra 8,000 miles around the tip of South America. So it's a deal. It's a great deal. A ship usually takes about 8 hours to travel through the Panama Canal because it goes very slowly. So 8 hours to travel through. Compare that with the weeks it would take to sail around South America. The Panama Canal is quite a shortcut! Exclamation. The Panama Canal is truly one of the greatest American building achievements of the 20th century. So there you can see it. A large modern ship is seen here traveling through the Panama Canal. And we dug all that out and built that, the Americans. Now let's look at people worth knowing more about. Here on the bottom of page 202, Colonel William Gorgas. During the Spanish-American War, more men died from malaria and yellow fever than were killed in battle. Panama had the same problems as Cuba. Its warm, moist air was an excellent place for mosquitoes carrying malaria and yellow fever to grow. Colonel William Gorgas, who had been successful in Cuba in destroying the mosquitoes that carried the two diseases, was now sent to Panama, where he was successful again. Gorgas helped to save the lives of both the canal builders and the people who lived in Panama. Let's see, I wanted to point something out. So God used this man to save so many lives. I don't even know, countless, because those mosquitoes which carry those diseases, malaria, which can be deadly, and yellow fever, he had a way of, I'm not sure how he did it, but he had a way of being able to destroy those insects that live and thrive in that hot, humid, moist culture. And so he really saved a lot of people. Maybe I'll do some research and figure out how he did that, because that's pretty, so he found a way to destroy them. I'm interested in that. Today you do Comp Check 16B. You do not do your chapter checkup yet. All right, so do a good job on that. And I look forward to having you study really hard for this upcoming test. I'll give you a test date in the future on chapters 14 through 16. And then in our next unit, we'll talk about World War I and World War II. Thank you.